Hello, and welcome to Canopy's Practice Success Podcast. I'm Davis Bell, the CEO of Canopy, and I will be sitting in as host for today's podcast. I'm excited. They don't usually let me do these things. They don't let me out in public often, so I don't know what happened, but glad to be here. I'm super excited to sit down with Enrico Palmerino, who's the CEO of Botkeeper. And today we're going to chat about Botkeeper and what the accounting profession can learn from the world of tech and venture capital, as well as we see AI taking the profession. So welcome, Enrico. Great to be here with you.
Thank you, Davis. Appreciate it, sir. It's
Yeah, of
awesome to be
course.
here as
Super
well.
excited. So I thought maybe, I've got two questions. I think they're probably super related. One, I just want to know about your background prior to Botkeeper. And my next question is what inspired you to create Botkeeper? And I think those are actually very related. So maybe, you just take them in whatever order you want.
Cool. Background, I was a quant major in college, and while at Babson, which is an entrepreneurial school, everyone's always starting businesses there, which is a lot of fun. And I started a company that automated how you uh, analyze and design lighting systems. And
Oh,
eventually, we
interesting.
became a big data aggregator in doing that and saw gaps in the marketplace for certain lighting products and then patented those and got into manufacturing. So now we were a software company and a manufacturer. And we were doing that across the globe, which meant for all you accountants that are listening, we had the world's perfect storm of accounting challenges, deferred rev rec, complicated asset depreciation schedules, foreign currency conversions, multi-entity, and of course, WIP and BOM and,
Wow.
inventory, you name it. So the business grew fast. Our accounting couldn't keep up. It was a constant struggle. And so when that company got acquired, I was like, I'm going to solve, I'm going to make a virtual finance department for businesses like me. And did that with a husband and wife who had started SmartBooks. So I teamed up with them and invested in their practice. It was like four, five, six, seven people, something like that at the time. Then
Hmm.
a few years later, we were, $5+ million CAS practice. And that was just CAS. So that was like big at the time. We were fast growing. And then we were struggling with all the same issues, like multiple apps that don't talk to each other, a G
Yep.
sheet to kind of keep track of who's working on what accounts and what apps they're using. You lose someone, it became way harder to find and hire people like in a very short period of time. There's like the accountants went missing. And the idea of like, it was just like, God, it would be so amazing. Like every other industry has one platform with all the feature and functionality you need to do the job but CAS. And so that would be great if you could have those features in a single system. And if it was in a single system, you'd have all the data and all the data would tie out. And with all that data,
Hmm.
you could build really powerful machine learning and AI. And if you could do that, you could automate away a lot of the processing, which would also help solve the human shortage. And that was
Yeah.
the impetus for Botkeeper.
So to kind of summarize, you start this business in college that introduces you to the pain of sort of dealing with accounting firms from the entrepreneurial sort of perspective, and
Yep.
then you went to go try to solve that by becoming a partner in a firm, and then you discovered all the pains associated with running a firm. And so to do
Yes.
that, then you went and started. So is your next business about, the pains or experiences as a tech company, or you're going to stay put here?
I have a couple ideas for solving pains with hiring, recruiting, and all of that. Because of having like a high growth, company like ours, that was
Yeah.
a huge challenge. But there's plenty to do yet to come with
Yeah.
Botkeeper. So,
Sure.
maybe in a decade from now.
Yeah. Well, I think, I think my perspective is the products become great when they're being solved by people who've really understood the pain associated with the users of those products. And sometimes you can just go and figure that out, and sometimes you experience them, in your own life, which is something that you did. So, kind of honing in on Botkeeper a little bit, you mentioned some of those problems. It sounded like disparate systems, data that's not talking to each other, um, the challenge of bringing new hires up to speed. Would you consider those to be the key challenges, or are there others that you would mention that drove to kind of the founding?
I think it all like in a weird way is entangled, right? So disparate systems and having a system switch between a half a dozen or a dozen apps to do bookkeeping for a single client times 20 clients, that's a whole lot of system switches on a given day or on a monthly basis. It's also a whole lot of security vulnerabilities that you're opening yourself up to, like that much more potential for margin erosion as every one of those apps,
Yep.
increases cost. And then the data tie out and the siloed data sets becomes more and more of a major problem when you want to start leveraging AI. So if you end up having a bunch of niche AI applications that don't talk to each other and require some sort of syncing of data, then you're wondering like, is the AI making good decisions based on bad data, or is it making decisions on yesterday's data instead of today's data? And does the data actually tie out? And therefore, is the decision the right one to be made? And we all encounter this on a daily basis when we go to like have a quarterly board meeting or executive meeting where like two departments are presenting different data numbers.
Yep.
But imagine like the complexity and the exacerbation when the speed of reaction is automated or AI is doing it. And then do you have visibility into what data set was used to make the conclusion? And you could just kind of see like this compounds. And then the other part of it is um, stress, because like in a world where like you can't find and hire people, then the people you do hire, you want to make sure that you take care of them and that they really like what they're doing and they're not being like unnecessarily like burnt out or stressed out. And when you have a shortage of people, that means more work for the people you do have. And I feel like accounting is just one of those things where like the second you come up for air, like to breathe at the end of the month, like you got to start over in the next month and you're doing the next cycle. And that if you lose a person or an employee, or someone takes vacation or sick time, it's like the whole world can come crashing down. And so the other aspect to like one of the big things we want to do with Botkeeper was, can we automate away as much of this like processing that needs to be done or that could be done on a daily basis so that you could lose an employee and someone could cover the gap pretty easily because they have to only be trained or brought up to speed on like 20% of the transactions, or the reconciliation happens automatically and the statements fetched, and or the month end review, like the AI is showing you what you need to touch or treat and address, and instead of saving it all for the month end and compressing the time frame to do the work, what if like you do that on a daily basis? There's no reason you shouldn't be able to.
Sure.
And like all of that was just like more and more reason like someone's got to figure this out.
Yeah.
And the daunting part was, as I started to like look at it, I'm like, I basically I build one company that builds 10 companies worth of like technology and
Yeah.
features and functions. And how are we going to pull that off? But as we got into it, I think we just looked at it like, I always use Excel as like the example because 99% of Excel users use 1% of Excel. So I
Sure.
just need to figure out like of these functionalities, like what were the most critical and important ones, and then get rid of a lot of the noise. And if I did that, there is a chance that we could actually build 10 companies worth of tech
Yeah.
under one company umbrella.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's sort of in software there's sort of two approaches, right? The first is you take this very narrow point solution approach. You're going to do this very narrow thing, and that's really appealing initially because it's just much easier to get off the ground. It's easier to It's easier to be good at one thing. But over time, you've created this problem for your customers, which is then they need to go buy a bunch of other things.
Totally.
And I think, the way you're talking is very similar to the kind of approach we've taken here, which is we're not just going to be that one thing. We're going to try to be kind of everything. And, there's a trendy, name for this in Silicon Valley currently, which is the compound startup, which whenever someone puts a new name on it, they
Nice.
think they've invented it. Obviously you've been at this for a while. We have, but it's harder, right?
See,
You got
I
to
just
build a
call it
lot
the
of stuff.
suite, which I'm pretty sure Google Suite's been around for a long
Yes,
time. Like
exactly. Yeah.
Meta Suite has been around and
Yes.
Microsoft Suite, like,
Right.
but
Yeah.
suites stick. So, you can round out the suite. It has longevity and lasting power. Whereas I
Yeah,
think like a niche
100%.
company, your ability to expand is difficult. And that's why most niches get acquired and put into a suite.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of like, you live, I'm trying to remember the exact phrase, but it's sort of like the phrase, you either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain. It's like you either die a point solution or live long enough to become a platform, right? So tell me just from like the, entrepreneurial hero's journey, because then I want to talk a lot about AI, which you've already sort of mentioned. What was the hardest thing? You set out, you bit off a lot, right? You're not just going to take a point solution approach. You're going to try to build this platform. What was the hardest thing about doing it?
I think the most difficult thing about the Botkeeper as a concept is you had to build a plane while you were flying it. There was no such thing because AI requires data, and the AI and the data we need to do automated accounting is private financial data, and it's exactly that. It's private. There's no like mass data set somewhere of private company data. And you can get like some public company data out there, but that doesn't help because like small businesses are structured very different. Their charts of accounts, everything's totally different than
Yep.
those on Wall Street. So we needed to acquire clients in order to acquire data sets in order to build. And then we knew that like we didn't want to be in the direct to SMB market because like the economics and AI world, the winner is the who has the most data, and like you can't get the most data if you're doing one to one sales. So we needed to find a way to get one to many in the accounting channel. So this like the difficult aspect was we had to go create enough value to have a business to get people to sign up, and then using that to get the data to build the dream product that we wanted to, and then to like go from building the dream product that we wanted to and having to like do it direct to SMB so we could get the proof points so that the world's laggard pessimistic tech adopters known as accountants would eventually be like trust the product enough to be able to buy it and use it in their practices on their clients, which is a risky thing. That process and that complexity of this tale of two cities and two worlds took 8 years. Like it took a lot
Wow.
of money. It took 8 years of time, but we finally got there and we launched Infinite. And now it's like I talk to our investors and like you've been at Botkeeper almost, arguably it's almost 10 years now. Like next year we'll cross the 10-year mark. And they're like, do you still got it to keep going? And I'm like, yeah, you guys don't understand. The last 8 years or 9 years were the prelude. Like this is like infinite launch. This is chapter one.
Yeah.
We're amped up and ready to go. And we see it too. And it took us 8 years to I think acquire a couple hundred accounting firms. It took us 3 quarters to acquire more than that
Wow.
since
Yeah.
Infinite. So it's
Well,
exciting time.
I read this quote that was talking about, ultimately your only moat, competitive moat, is obsession, because people who are obsessed with a problem are willing to go spend 8 years, right? Like if it's someone who's just trying to build a little app and flip it to some big company and make some money, they're just not going to do that, right? They're not going to spend 8 years, suffer all the pain, and build this slow build, and that you can build a generational company that way, but it's a slow burn, right? And the platform approach is a slow burn too. Like it's just the nature of it. But
Yeah.
to your point, like once you've done it, you can really camp out there for decades because it's just super hard for anyone else to come along and
I
compete
mean,
like
that's the
that.
moat. Like, people are like, well, what's stopping? Like, I'll tell you what's stopping. 8 years of development, 100 and something million dollars, and billions of transactions that we needed to, billions of transactions, tens of thousands of companies, and hundreds of accounting firms of data and transactions to build what we built. And the unique thing about this is like when we first started, the only thing we were competing against in terms of like client and data acquisition was like old school human labor
Yeah.
accounting, which
Right.
meant we could charge $3.99 a month per client to do this. And like that was a third or a quarter of the cost of like the labor.
Right.
Today, Botkeeper sells that same thing for 69 bucks a month. So anyone today that's like, hey, I'm just gonna follow Botkeeper's playbook, do the exact same thing, you'd hemorrhage so many more dollars than we did because you'd have to start with human labor to process and get there and train the models, and you'd have to do it at such a loss. Like, you know, it, like we know we were, barely breaking even or had like minimal gross margins when we were selling it at 3.99 until the tech caught up. Like if you had to come in and start selling it at $69 today and you were doing it by human labor, like you'd have to, raise two or three times the amount of money that we did in order to pull it off and get to the same point. So it's a good place to be. It's just it's a hard place to be. But like you said, I'm
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with it. Like we love what we're doing. We got a great team that makes it a lot of fun to work with, and all of us like we've kind of been working for this thing for like so long, and like see it come out is just
Yeah.
like, all right, now let's go.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's a nice thing to be on the other side of, right? I mean, 8 years of kind of slugging it away and slowly acquiring firms, and then finally get to this inflection point. Like it just
Yeah.
there's nothing better.
That's why
Well,
they
tell
say it's a
me,
10-year overnight success.
yeah, exactly. And no, yeah, I mean, it really is true, right? I mean, it's you get these flash in the pan, companies, but they're just exceedingly rare. And the minute you dig into it, it's just there was that like decade of just sort of building and grinding and failure and iteration, and it's just kind of how it goes.
Yeah. I
So
think they say that
you
like it takes
mentioned,
like on average 15 years for a company to get to, if you can get to $100 million. Those who did it, it
right,
takes them like 15 years. And there's been like a handful in like the history of time, a handful of
right,
exceptions who have done
sure,
it in like 8, 9, or 10.
right.
So
Yeah, open AI is probably a more recent exception,
yeah,
but even that,
Slack.
like,
Slack was one of
yeah,
them.
right.
Um,
Yeah, but there's just not that many of them, to your
no.
point. So you mentioned AI. It's impossible to have a conversation about either accounting or software, and certainly accounting software, without talking about AI. So tell me first. You made a point with which I violently agree around AI and the ability to leverage AI relative to being a platform, versus a point solution. So
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit about that.
So to me, I look at like the future of AI is going to be very different than the AI we use today. Like the future of AI, a single prompt delivers task completion,
Yep.
and that's not right now. Like right now, your a prompt is completing like an aspect of a task,
Yeah.
and
Right.
arguably like a tiny component. Like if you consider bookkeeping as the task, like your prompt is completing one subsegment of like is actually completing an aspect of a subsegment of bookkeeping. So, and that works ish because previously, like with an app stack, you have people playing traffic cops in terms of figuring out organization and timing and sequence. Like you go into the app, you do the thing, you take the completed aspect of it, you move it into the next app, you do the next part of the equation, take it out, and again and again. But in an AI world, you have all these things that are going to be idealistically happening automatically. But if they can't talk to each other, and you see this all the time, and like marketing agencies, and that's all they do, marketing, they have a hard time getting the data to actually tie out. If you've got all these disparate apps that aren't integrated with each other, and I can't see that ever being fixed. There's 1,600 apps in the Zero and QBO marketplaces. The cost for one company to integrate with all 1,600, not going to be the case.
Yeah.
So you're going to have all these like siloed data sets, siloed apps performing siloed tasks and functions that have no purview or context into anything else that's going on. And that just creates a world of hurt. Like, because you're now like basically the data traffic collides. Like, did the thing get done on time, or did it get completed before like the other component was completed and it had the remaining data that it needed to complete its own task? And what was used, or what was the context that goes into the completion of a task? And that's where I think like this, there's a reason why the biggest companies in the world that are winning the AI race are suites. Like, Meta is acquiring companies that will round out its suite to give it the most context for its AI, whether it's Instagram or WhatsApp, or Oculus. Like, they're trying to take all the components that you would need to create a very powerful AI solution. Same thing with Microsoft. Even like Zoom is trying to expand its offering to get into it. But Microsoft was like, hey, we already have most of the business suite offering, and then video and conferencing, all that like is rounding it out. Google is another one. Look at what OpenAI is doing and how they're expanding. But they're at the core. For us, like, I think that's going to be one of the advantages we have down the road, is having everything in a singular suite allows the AI to have context, which allows it to do like one of the new features we have in beta right now that's coming out at the end of the year is insights, where you can ask our AI anything you want to know about your firm, like how to be more efficient, and it can look at all the data that's there and come up with that. Who's the top performer? Who could take on more clients? Like, where are bottlenecks in your process? And it will be able to see and deliver the answer to those. And in an ideal world, you could tell it to just like fix that, right? And it would just go and fix or do like, go find me another 6 hours of time savings, and make it happen. Um, and it can do it. And you can't do that without context. And I think, ultimately context is rounded out data sets and integrated data sets where the data actually ties out perfectly. Because if it doesn't, and you have these AI tools that are producing an immense amount of data and ingesting an immense amount of data, you just start to have, like, we've all seen this, where your database gets riddled with bad data, and you end up having to like basically throw it out, like, or hit pause entirely and do a massive cleanup project. And that cleanup project becomes near impossible when gene sequencers, and like in a totally unrelated space, when they go off the wall, like someone creates a prompt that has them sequencing like out of order or putting it in the improper folder, they potentially create petabytes worth of data that ends up needing to be scrapped because it's and redone because it just can't be fit into the database in the right way, and there's no way to clean it up because it's just too much data and it's easier to start over. So I think I think the world's really exciting for AI, but I think you're going to see this trend of those players who are niche apps trying to round out and be more of a suite or more comprehensive or wholesome in their area. And you're going to see probably more suites emerge in general in the accounting sector. And you'll see acquisitions. I think now that the markets are starting to open up again, you're going to see the players that are in there like merging together to create the suite or to round out the missing components.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you very articulately explained how we think about it and how I think about it. I just AI, typically a new innovation favors the scrappy, new entrant, right? Because the person who's already out there shipping product just has a hard time innovating, taking advantage of it. But I think the nature of AI is such that its value comes from data at the end of the day. I mean,
Yeah.
that is the fuel for AI, right? Like if you just plug AI into the software and there's just nothing there, like I sort of think about this framework as sort of like, you know, data and action. So like, but the action has to be preceded by data, right? Like
Yep.
it doesn't know what action to take. The action will be based upon in our context, it's like, all right, well, what documents did they submit last tax season, right?
Yeah.
Therefore, these are the documents they're going to need next season. And
And if
also,
it
I
was
agree with
blank,
you.
the AI is not going to know what, like,
Right. It's just
yeah,
gonna,
there's no pattern to recognize.
right.
No, yeah,
Yeah. So and I agree with you too that where we're at today, it to me, like one way to think about it that resonates with me. I think about AI today as like a not super smart intern. So it's like, if
yeah,
you've ever worked with an intern, you're like, hey, can you go like Google a list and like come back, and they'll come back and you're like, well, that's not what I wanted. And you send them back. And maybe the third time you're like, okay, finally. And you're sort of like, did I actually really save any time? I mean, I'm trying to help this intern out, get some
yeah,
experience, but maybe I didn't save tons of time. And maybe the first time you did. And, so it sort of nets out. But there's a big difference between that and just working with a seasoned career professional who you can just pick up, slack them or text them or call them and be like, I need you to do this complex thing, and they just come back and it's done. And I think that we're in the dumb intern phase, but the rate of progression is such that I think, and this is what they call agentic AI, where it's like just doing it, maybe at a prompt and maybe later just not. It's just recognizing it needs to be done. It's
yeah.
hard to know exactly when that's going to come to fruition, but I think, yeah, I think we're seeing the opportunity in the near term future very similarly.
Yeah, and it's to your point, the the AI revolution, I think most of the benefit or value that we're going to see out of this is going to be the incumbents will become stronger because they're the ones who have the vast data sets. The new players, to your point, one, haven't built their own AI. Like this is another thing too. I always point out most of these new AI companies, they're just leveraging OpenAI or
Yeah.
another like existing AI model, which in general, all of those are also LLMs or generative AI, which doesn't bode well for accounting. Like you can do some narrative stuff, but if you want task specific AI, like that just takes a whole lot of coding, and you have to do that
Yep.
yourself. And if you want high accuracy accounting, that's the only way to do it. At least like that's what anyone says is the only way to do it today. Does that change?
Sure.
Maybe generative AI over time can get better at it, but like how it's architected, it doesn't look like it's ever going to head in that direction because it is general, and general doesn't bode well for specific accuracy that's based on like machine learning versus based on inventive synopsis of data sets. So yeah, I think the big players are definitely going to have the advantage. The small players, it's a risky time to use like a brand new AI company because OpenAI made a change earlier this year that killed 1,200 AI companies just because they got rid of one of their APIs. Um, Historically, you never had to worry about that if you were using a brand new startup on the block
Yep.
because they built
Yep.
their own software and you just
Right.
had to worry how much runway they have. Now, if it's an AI brand new, they call them on the Silicon Valley. They call them wrapper companies. Like
Right.
you're wrapping someone else's
Yep.
AI with like a concept, and that has like there's like no moat to that. I don't think.
Yep. Yeah.
But it'll be interesting. I think a lot's going to get done, and there's so much unlocked potential that we weren't leveraging, and that companies were sitting on in their data. And it's just going to take those incumbents to be willing to invest and explore and challenge the status quo.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. And maybe one last topic for conversation. We've been geeking out a little bit on the software side of things, bringing it back to accounting. I think, my mental model for AI in accounting has been the exosuit. And I first called this a cyborg, but we've got some nerds here on staff who corrected me. And if you think about the movie Avatar, the humans walk around in those, they're inside this robot, and it can pick up a 8,000 pound boulder or whatever, move really fast. And that's sort of how I conceptualize AI, because I mean, so much. I don't want to venture a guess, but an enormous amount of the actual human labor in a firm is menial, low value add, manual, just sort of, you know, pushing paper from one place to another. And
Process.
then, yeah. And I think people don't like to do that. And it's a bad use of their time. So I
Or
just
they like it
envision,
for all the reasons we wish they didn't, which is it's easy. I don't have to think,
yeah,
and
sure. Yeah, I don't
my
have to.
Monday through Friday, and just kind of like wake up and get paid.
Yeah. So I think that like most people get into the profession because they're passionate about actually accounting. They want
Yeah,
to be think strategically and they want to help people strategically, and then they
yeah.
just get mired down in the weeds of this stuff. So what would you agree, disagree? Would you modify that? Like how what's your sort of model for it?
No, I agree. I mean, for the longest time, we used to compare Botkeeper to Iron Man. Like Tony Stark is nothing really. I mean, he's like a brilliant person, but like he becomes a superhero when he has his suit, and we would see the AI as being the suit, and on its own, it can't do much. And like even like the Iron Man suit, it requires Tony to command it or direct it or do stuff. And that is the difference between arguably like AI actually being an intern. An intern conceptually, like while it might he or she might take like directions from you to do stuff. The reality is that person can also go do things for you without you even asking because they recognize they're like self-starting, take initiative, they recognize a problem, they attempt to solve it. And we've all had those interns who are like, hey, by the way, I did this because I thought you might like it. And you might be like, oh, that's cool. Like we don't need it. But like the self-starting nature of it and the fact that it did is like really cool. AI can't do that right now. AI is only going to do the things you specifically tell it to every time you tell it to do something. So until it can start to like problem solve for you without direction, it is going to be an exoskeleton or the Iron Man suit that's just amplifying the intelligence and the use of our people. And arguably, it's like kind of like the Iron Man suit. If you took your weakest you know engineer, like your weakest Tony Stark from a intelligence standpoint, you put him in the suit, he'll be able to do good stuff like pick things up and fly. You take a brilliant person, you put them in the suit, and they can accomplish like insane things. And I think we're going to see the same thing happen with AI. The smartest people out there, the best accountants, are going to take accounting up notches and levels that like we've never thought possible. And those who were not the strongest accountants, they're going to now be able to like be like the strongest accountants or be a really great senior accountant thanks to AI. But they're still not gonna play. It's not like the all intensive like playing field leveler that some people think it is.
Yeah.
There is varying degrees of skill set and use that amplify its outputs.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Hey, Enrico, this has been super fun. Would love to do it again. And just encourage everyone if they want to know more about Botkeeper, botkeeper.com. Super cool company, great product, great leadership, and excited to see what you guys get up to next.
Thank you so much, sir. I
All
appreciate
right,
it.
thanks, Enrico.